Morning, everyone. Today is December the 9th, I believe. It's 11 a.m. Central Time here in Missouri, and this is the second live stream that I've done, answering people's questions and just responding to messages in general. We'll see how this goes again. I'm excited to see what people have to say. We've got some questions here right off the bat. I want to start with, first off, letting everyone know how you can ask a question if you would like to ask a question. First off, message me either on YouTube or my Facebook page, or you can email me at the email address provided in the description here of this live stream. That's the best way to get a hold of me because there's so many comments in the live chat section. I can't get to all of them. So if you have a question you want me to answer, go ahead and send it there and I'll get to it if I can. Keep in mind too, I'm going to answer relevant questions. In other words, questions that I can relate to. I don't want to give people false information. I want to make sure that I'm giving accurate information, things that I'm familiar with. So without further ado, let's get started here. Our first question is from Nick. Greetings from South Dakota. I've got a question for your show. What's going on with the 1.5 liter engines found in the Malibus, Cruises, Equinoxes, etc.? Why are the pistons destroying themselves so prematurely? On a different note, I love your videos. Keep up the good work. The 1.5 liter and 1.4 liter engine, the 1.4 is in the Cruise. I've got my thoughts about what's going on with those engines and why they're kind of destroying themselves prematurely. The deal with these engines is they're trying to squeeze as much fuel mileage out of them. They're trying to squeeze as much efficiency out of these engines as possible. If you run an engine lean, you're forcing more air into the engine with less fuel. More efficient, right? The problem is that creates a lot of heat. This is just my theory. I'm not saying that this is, a proven fact based on what we found with these engines. But from what I've seen, my theory is because the engines are running lean, the pistons can't handle that heat, so they crack, right? If you've got an engine that overheats to the point where it cracks a cylinder head, that crack is due to the heat. So I'm thinking it's kind of the same thing. They're running so hot that the pistons are cracking. Again, that's my opinion based on what I've seen. I can't say that that's a proven fact because there hasn't been any studies done that have proven that. Now, General Motors' fix to that was actually a recall where they reprogrammed the engine control module and changed the oil. They were very specific about what type of oil and filter you used. So it's very possible that the programming of the engine ran it a little bit more rich and not quite as lean. So I'm not entirely sure, but from what I've seen and what I know about automobiles, that's my guess. I don't know for 100% sure, but if I were to answer that question, like I just did, that is what I would say. So thank you for the question, Nick. That's my take on that. Let's go over here to Michael, who sent me this message via email. He says, Hi, Daniel. My name is Mike, and I'm one of your YouTube subscribers. I will not be able to watch your next scheduled live streams on YouTube. Sorry you had to miss out, but don't worry, they'll be up here for you to watch later. And I had a few questions to ask, so I thought I would let you know in advance. Number one, how reliable are the Ford 5.4 liter Triton V8 engines? Okay, between 2004 and 2007, those were the worst reliability-wise. The 5.4 was great up to 2003, and then when they introduced the 3-valve version of that engine, that's when things started to go south. You had spark plugs getting stuck in the cylinder heads. You had timing chain problems. You had cam phaser problems. Oil pumps going bad. There were a lot of major issues. In fact, my 2007 F-150 that I have actually had the entire engine replaced after what I believe is the oil pump failed. So I would avoid the 2004 to 2007 models unless you can get a really good deal on it and justify replacing the engine in the truck like I did with my F-150. The 2008 to 2010s were better. They fixed the spark plug problem, and they took care of the timing chain issues as well. But again, you've got to make sure that you maintain those engines very well. Make absolutely sure you change that oil every 5,000 miles, because those timing chains have hydraulic tensioners that are actuated by engine oil pressure, and if you're not maintaining your engine oil, you're going to run into timing issues. Second question, what is the difference between the overhead valve 4-liter V6 and the single overhead cam 4-liter engine in the Ford Explorer, and what are the positives and negatives of each? If you could answer these questions, that would be great. Thanks, and have a great day. Well, I hope you have a great day too. So let's talk about the 4-liter V6s in the Explorer, and they put some in the Rangers as well. Here's the deal. The overhead valve 4-liter V6 engine that Ford built, I think that went up to 97 or 98, something like that, is when they had overhead valves. The valves were opened with push rods. You had one camshaft that ran through the middle of the block, and then you had push rods and lifters. That's a very, very proven, reliable valve system, or timing system if you want to say, because you only have one timing chain with no tensioners that goes up from the crankshaft to the engine to the camshaft. It's proven reliable. On the downside, the engines aren't quite as efficient. It's a little bit harder to adjust valve timing, and you don't get quite as much power out of them. In the late 90s, Ford went to the single overhead cam 4-liter V6 engines. And while they produced more power and it got a little bit better efficiency, the problem is the way they designed this thing. Not only did the timing chains have problems and the tensioners have problems, but the components would break, and then when you went to service these things, one of the timing chains was on the back of the engine. So it's sandwiched between the back of the engine and the transmission. And in order to get to that, you either got to pull the engine or you got to take the transmission out. Why someone would design something like that, I don't know. It's one of those things where there had to be a reason behind it, and I would love to know that reason. I don't know the reason why. That's the main disadvantage with those single overhead cam engines. Now around 02, 03, they fixed the problems, and they weren't nearly as problematic as the first design was. So if it were me, I would, for reliability's sake, I would stick with the overhead valve engine if you can. It's not going to be quite as powerful or as efficient, but it's a rock-solid, reliable engine, and it's something that's going to last a long time. The single overhead cam engines try to get into the mid-2000s. That's when they fixed their timing issues. So there's your positives and negatives of each of the single overhead cam versus the overhead valve 4-liter V6 Ford engine. Let's go on to the next question here. Stephen sent me a message here on Gmail. It says, "Hi Daniel, my name is Steven. I am from YouTube. I saw that you have a live stream coming up. I have some YouTube questions. So here is my question. What are some of the best battery brands out there? I'm looking at a 2011 Toyota Venza. Needs a new battery very soon." Okay. Obviously, if you want to get the best of the best, just get a Toyota battery. And the funny thing is, it's not even going to be made by Toyota. It's just going to have a Toyota sticker on it. The other brands I would consider, and people are going to differ with me on this, but I personally have had really good luck with the Duralast Gold brand batteries. They come with a 3-year free replacement. AutoZones are all over the country. Sears actually made some really good batteries as well, but with Sears being on their way out, it's hard to say what's going to happen there. Motorcraft makes some good batteries too. AC Delco's kind of hit and miss. I haven't really had the best luck with AC Delco batteries, but there's so many others out there that I haven't really tried. Here's the 3 brands I would recommend. I'd recommend Duralast Gold, Interstate, and Toyota batteries for your Toyota Venza there. That's what I would get. Okay. Don't see his first name, but we have Mr. McArdle sent me a question here. Says, hello, I really enjoyed the video about you changing the bulbs on your Fusion to LED bulbs. I was wondering what the part numbers were for the headlight kit and what did you buy? It seems like there are a lot of cheap kits online and I'd like to stick with an established company like Philips. Thanks. Well, if I remember correctly, those LED bulbs are Philips brand bulbs, and I bought them off of Rock Auto. It was the only brand that Rock Auto had available. And with the amount of labor that goes into replacing those headlamp bulbs, I would definitely get a good brand, spend 20 bucks extra more or whatever it is, and get something that's actually going to last and not going to go bad. I would not get a cheap bulb with all the labor that's involved in getting to those headlamp bulbs on the Fusion. So go on Rock Auto. I believe they're Philips brand, and that's where I would get them from. That's where I got mine, and I've had really good luck with it. So whatever I've had good experience with, I'm going to recommend. All right, we have another message here from Coleman. Hey Daniel, I'm a huge fan of your videos and noticed that you always use motorcraft filters on Ford vehicles. I was just wondering, is it a Ford thing or would you use OEM filters on all vehicles? I have a 2006 Jeep Grand Cherokee with a 3.7 V6 and was wondering if it was you, would you go with a Mopar oil filter? Thank you, Coleman. Yeah, I would go with the Mopar filter. The thing you have to realize is the engine oil is basically the blood of your engine. Your engine is only as good as your engine oil is. For the $1 or $2 more that it costs to get a Motorcraft filter or a Mopar filter, why wouldn't you? I mean, it's unlikely that you're going to have problems if you go with a cheaper brand like an STP or a Fram. But seeing as you only have to spend $1 or $2 more to get a name brand filter that you know is going to be good, I would do it. That's my recommendation for that one. Okay, let's see. Well, let's go on to some other messages here. We have some YouTube messages from some subscribers. Jordan says, hey Dan, I noticed you mentioned Scotty Kilmer in your last live stream. You said you weren't a Scotty Kilmer. What did you mean by that? Okay. So what I meant by I'm not a Scotty Kilmer was I don't have near the popularity that guy does. He's been around for a real long time, has a lot of experience. He's made a lot of really good videos. That being said, there are no two mechanics on the face of this planet who are going to agree with each other on everything. Everybody's going to have their own opinion on things. Here's my opinion on Scotty Kilmer. I respect him greatly for the success that he's gotten here on YouTube. He makes a lot of good videos. He makes a lot of quick fixes for people who need to get on the road and want to fix stuff in their own garage. A couple things I find kind of interesting about Scotty. I've noticed, at least from what I can see, it doesn't look like he has a big garage or a shop or a lift or anything. And you'll notice in his videos he's usually crawling around underneath a vehicle that's on jack stands. And I think I know why he does that, because the type of people that he's making videos for, they're not going to have a lift in their garage like I do. They're not going to have a two-post. They're not going to have much experience. They're not going to be doing this on a daily basis. So I think he does that to relate to his viewers better. So that's my take on that. The other thing about Scotty too that I differ a little bit with him on is he tends to be a little bit biased towards Ford and Toyota. In one particular video, I remember him recommending a diesel Ford pickup truck over the other two big brands out there, Ram and Chevrolet. So the only problem I have with that is you have to clarify. If you know about diesel trucks, you're going to know that Ford had lots of problems with their 6-liter Power Stroke and especially the 6.4-liter Power Stroke, which was extremely expensive to fix if anything went wrong. Knowing those things, it depends on what type of year and generation of diesel truck the customer is looking for. If you've got someone who's looking for a say like I want to look for a 2004 or 2005 diesel truck, what would you recommend? Well, obviously not a Ford, because they're going to have the 6-liter Power Stroke. If you're a Ford loyalist and you really want one, I'd recommend you doing the bulletproofing. Everybody knows about that stuff now. So That being said, there are some Ford trucks that are better than other brands out there, and there are some Ford trucks that are definitely not as good as other brand trucks out there. You have to clarify with people and make sure that they understand what to look for in a diesel truck, what to avoid, and what to pursue. That being said, though, I am subscribed to Scotty. I like watching his videos, and he was kind of the inspiration behind me starting this live stream that I'm doing right now, because he did the same thing, and I thought, well, I could answer some people's questions that way too. So, okay, let's go to another question here on Facebook. Tyler says, thoughts on the 2011 Subaru Legacy 2.5? Great videos. Thanks, Tyler. Subaru is a great car. They did a lot with Toyota. Some of their older boxer engines had head gasket issues, but they really weren't that bad to fix. I would go for it. If you're wanting a good all-wheel drive vehicle that's fun to drive, I would definitely go for it. In fact, the latest book released by Consumer Reports that I looked at, there was a Subaru model in there. It was either the Outback or the Legacy, one of the two. It was the only vehicle of all the 2018 models that they tested that they didn't have any dislikes about, so to speak. Everything was positive about the car. You don't see that very often, but Subaru does a good job with their cars. I'd recommend it. Steve sent me a message here. Oh, this is another one about the LED lights in the Fusion. I was watching your video from April about the LED upgrades for the Fusion and was wondering how much more visibility down the road do they give, at any, if any at all. I'm looking to do the exact same upgrade. They're brighter, that's for sure. And since they're brighter, you definitely do have better visibility down the road. So I would recommend it if you're looking for better visibility. The only thing I wish they had was LED high beam bulbs. And I haven't been able to find them yet, but they do give you better visibility down the road. So if you're looking to see more, I would recommend it. Okay, let's go with another question here. I'm just going through some messages. Will has a question. I've been watching your videos on replacing timing chain tensioners on an 01 Explorer. I have a 94 that is having the same problems. I was wondering if you could answer a question. I'm a bit of a novice when it comes to engine repair, but I have a logical mind and love learning how things work. From having looked under the hood and in the Haynes manual, it seems the first generation of Explorers have a different type of tensioner, one rather than two or three, and I'm just not looking hard enough for these tensioners, or the first gen Explorer engines arranged differently. Okay, rewind to the beginning of this live stream video, and I'll answer that question for you if you didn't see it already. But yes, they are different. You having a 94, you're going to have an overhead valve engine design. You'll have one camshaft and push rods to open and close the valves. So it is designed differently, and honestly, you've got a more reliable setup there. I would be surprised if you're having timing chain problems with that type of engine setup unless the engine was neglected oil change wise for a long time. So look into it and check, one of the things I would do is I would pull the dipstick, see what the oil looks like, look at the oil cap, maybe pull one of the valve covers off and see if it's all sludged up under there. You could have an issue, but more than likely, I don't think your issue lies with the timing chain there. It could be an ignition problem. Okay, Riley sent me a message here via Gmail. It says, how do you say I should bulletproof my 2007 F350 with a Harley-Davidson trim? That's a question for Power Stroke Help. Go on YouTube and look up Power Stroke Help. You'll find this channel that's run by a guy who's named Bill Hewitt. This guy has tons and tons of videos on Power Stroke bulletproofing. Go check his videos out. Those are going to answer all your questions. I've never done a 6-liter Power Stroke bulletproof job, but this guy has done hundreds of them, so he can answer all your questions. Go check out his channel. Eric asks a question on Gmail as well. It says, hello, I'm messaging you from Chicago, Illinois. Oh, hello, neighbor. I have a question for you that hopefully you can put me in the right direction. I've got an 05 Mazda with a couple of check engine codes. I'm assuming that a couple of them are being shown due to the codes that are on there, but the codes I have is 2 lean bank 1 and the other one is 2 lean bank 2. I do have a K&N, wait a second here. I do have a K&N air filter for the car. I've cleaned out. I've also checked the air filter and the mass airflow sensor all the way back to the throttle body to make sure that all the connections are tightened and there's no possible way for air to enter, but I may be missing something. It's saying cylinder 1 or bank 1 because that's where I feel like the air is entering into. Am I just being misled? Or am I looking in the wrong area? What could be the potential problem? The car has 197,000 miles on it. Okay, so your engine is running lean. Generally, the cause of an engine running lean is a vacuum leak. But as you said in your message there, you checked for vacuum leaks, didn't really see anything. So one of the things I would look for as well is leaking intake manifold gaskets. If an intake manifold gasket leaks, that can cause it to run lean for sure. Check your oxygen sensors as well. You may have a bad oxygen sensor that's not reading properly. Check the wiring, make sure the wiring isn't damaged. But I would, here's what I would do. Get yourself some starter fluid or some brake clean and spray starter fluid and brake clean around the intake manifold gaskets as well as around the intake manifold itself. Check for any cracks or leaks. Spray it around the vacuum hoses and see if the engine changes speed. If the engine starts to speed up a little bit, that means it's burning that starter fluid or brake clean that you're using, and that indicates a vacuum leak. I've got a video on YouTube here somewhere, I believe it was a Toyota Corolla, that I found a leak at the intake manifold gaskets the same way with that. So try that out. That's your best way to find vacuum leaks. Okay, we have another question here on Gmail. I have a 2016 F-150 with a 5-liter V8 and a 6-speed transmission. Are there any known issues with this powertrain that I should look out for? Not really. The only issues I've seen with the F-150 with the 5-liter V8 were either extremely rare instances, like I mentioned one time I saw a 5-liter V8 that had dropped a valve and resulted in a broken connecting rod, but that's extremely rare. It's nowhere near to the point where it'll create what they call a technical service bulletin. If you want to look into common issues for your truck in particular, what you can do is you can go to these sites like AllData or Mitchell, and you can purchase a subscription for one vehicle. Typically, I think they maybe cost like 20 or 30 bucks. And what that'll do is some are for life, some are for 1 year period. It'll give you access to all the service information, wiring diagrams, as well as technical service bulletins, and that'll stay updated. If you want to look for any known issues that Ford has found with that vehicle, that's the route I would go. But right off the bat, from what I've seen on a daily basis and looking at those trucks, any issues that I've seen with them personally has been isolated or a very rare event that's not a common problem. They're really reliable. I would definitely recommend the truck. They've proven themselves. Okay, let's take another question here via Gmail. Thank you guys for the messages. This is great. Nathan says, hey Daniel, I've been a long-term subscriber since about 2009. Wow. When the Excursion videos came out. Wow. You've been subscribed for a long time there. I really enjoy the content you put out and enjoy the knowledge you share in each of your videos. My question was that I recently bought a 2000 Camry and the low beam bulbs went out. I bought new bulbs and replaced them, and as it turns out the light was still out. I checked the fuses and the wires and there's no power to the plug. I temporarily jumped one of the headlights off the other one for night driving with some similar gauge wires, but I'm unsure where to go from there because the plug has no power leading up to the wire. Any insight would be appreciated. Thanks for your time. That's a good question. A 2000 Camry. Here's what I would check. If you've checked the fuse, I would check your headlamp relay next. It should be right there in the same fuse block. You'll want to look for the headlamp relay. High beams and low beams are usually separate. The other thing I would do is check and see if the high beam works on that headlamp which isn't working, or if just the low beam works. If it does, that's a really good indication that it could be a relay. If not, That's a good question. I would recommend double checking the wiring. Make sure that the plug that the bulb itself actually plugs into isn't burnt up. Another thing that I've seen commonly across all kinds of different cars, no particular make or model, whatever, is the connector that the headlamp bulb plugs into can burn up, and then that will cause your headlamps to become inoperative on that side. So check your connectors and check the headlamp relays. That's where I would go next. Riley says, hi Dan, I'm from Fox Lake, Illinois. I have another question. My 2010 Jeep Commander leaks every time it rains, and it started doing it when the windshield got replaced. Any tips? Well, I'd go right back to whoever replaced your windshield and tell them that it's leaking. When they replace a windshield on a vehicle, there's a sealant that they apply across the body of the vehicle, and then they set the glass on that sealant. I've seen it many, many times where a windshield is replaced, but the sealant wasn't applied properly, or they didn't have enough sealant in a certain area, and then the windshield leaks. So yeah, get in touch with whoever replaced your windshield and have them fix that, because if it started leaking right after they replaced the windshield, that's definitely the cause, and the sooner you get a hold of them, the more likely they are to fix it without charging you. Stan has a question about heavier weight engine oil. He says, Dan, do you believe in using heavier weight motor oil in older gasoline engines? For instance, a lot of engines today are calling for 0W30 or 5W30. After piling on 150 to 200,000 miles, how would you feel about going to 1030 or 1040? As for 15W40, too much detergent in that Rotelli stuff. It's better suited for diesels. Yes, I agree. Here's the deal. It all depends on the mechanical condition of your engine. Even if you've got 150, 200,000 miles on your vehicle, if you're not burning any oil and you're not noticing any oil pressure issues, which you shouldn't have to begin with, I would stick with what the manufacturer recommends. Keep in mind that they built these engines to run on that oil. Now, if you live in extreme hot or cold climates, like for example, if you live up north where it's going to get 20 below 0 Fahrenheit or something like that, I would use a lighter weight engine oil in those extreme temperatures. On the other hand, if you live in Arizona where it's going to be 120 plus in some extreme days, you may want to consider a heavier weight oil for those climates as well. But that being said, if your engine doesn't have any mechanical issues and you're not noticing any oil consumption or any oil pressure issues, I would just stick with what the manufacturer recommends. It doesn't hurt to use a heavier weight oil, but it is going to have a very, very, very slight effect on the efficiency of the engine. So either way, you can use it, it's not going to hurt. You can stick with what the manufacturer recommends, and it's not going to hurt either. Okay, another question here on Gmail. A friend of mine has a 2002 Camaro with a turbo. He let it sit for a couple months, and the other day he started it up and it started knocking. It was not knocking before he stopped driving it. Do you have a diagnosis? Okay, here's the deal. On the 02 Camaros, you had lifters in those engines. If an engine sits for months like that, all that oil is going to drain down into the pan and your lifters can go dry. I would be very curious to know how long it was knocking. Did he start it up and then heard the awful knocking sound for about 5-10 seconds and then shut it off? If so, make sure you keep an eye on the oil pressure when you start it back up again and let it run for a little bit. More than likely what has to happen is those lifters have to be primed, so to speak, or lubricated, and it'll go away. If it doesn't go away, it could need new lifters, and I would make absolutely sure, again, make sure that the engine has sufficient oil pressure and it's not running dry. Because if it is running dry, you've got a much more serious problem. Something could be blocking the pickup tube of the oil pump. It's hard to say. Okay, Riley asked me another question. He said, what made you decide to become a mechanic? I knew it was what I wanted to do. Years and years ago, gosh, back when I was 8, 9 years old, I loved the idea of working on cars. I liked the idea of taking things apart, putting them back together, fixing things, and that just turned into a passion for automobiles, and I decided that I wanted to start wrenching. So I kind of knew I wanted to do it from the beginning, and that's why I do it. I just love doing it. I really don't know how to explain it other than it's what I enjoy doing. Okie doke, let's see here. Let's go for some more messages here on YouTube. I'll take a look at some of the comments here. I've gone through all the messages on Gmail and Facebook, so let's look at a couple comment questions here, since it seems like there are still some questions in the comments. Okay, Chris, he has an 06 F-150 with 185,000 miles. Should he change the alternator or fuel pump at a certain mileage, 200,000? Well, if there's nothing wrong with it, I wouldn't. I was faced with that same question when I replaced the engine on my 2007 F-150. It's like, wow, the alternator's right here. Do I replace it or not? And I decided not to, because it's really not that big of a job to do if it eventually does go out. And if you have a good alternator, it should last forever, provided the bearings hold up. So I wouldn't replace it. Save your money, and if it ever does need to be replaced, it's not like you have to pull the whole engine out to get to it. Now, if it was a design where it took 7 hours or so to get to, then yeah, I would say, yeah, replace it while you're there. But seeing as that's an easy fix and there's no problems with it, I wouldn't worry about it. The same thing with the fuel pump. You have to drop the tank to get to that fuel pump, so I wouldn't worry about it if you're not experiencing any problems. Okay, let's see here. We got another message via Gmail. Dominic says, greetings from Europe. What do you think about the best USA-made diesel failure-free engine compared to old Mercedes diesels? I personally have an Audi A6 C4 with a 2.5 TDI, 5 cylinders, smaller like in Volvo V70 TDI before 2000. I think these engines aren't available in the USA. Well, anything can be available depending on to what extent you want to go to have it brought over. But as mass-produced vehicles, no, those weren't available over here to the best of my knowledge. The best USA-made diesel engine, failure-free? That's a good question. It depends on what kind of vehicle you're looking for. When it comes to pickup truck diesels, a lot of times the 6 liters and 6.4 Power Stroke engines had issues. The 7.3s were really good. The 6.6 Duramax has always been a good engine, and the Cummins engines have always been great as well. That being said, Volkswagen made a lot of good diesel engines here and sold them here in the U.S., and they ran forever. They were great engines. It looks like you're probably looking for something that's more passenger car type diesels. I would look into Volkswagen, because while Volkswagen doesn't necessarily have a good reputation with all mechanics because they're challenging to work on, their diesel engines were made really well, and they can last a long time if properly maintained. Okay, let's take another, let's look for another question here in the comments section. I drive a 2004 Ford Escape with a 3-liter V6, and every time I go over a bump, I hear a popping sound coming from the front suspension. I was wondering if you happen to know what is possibly making the noise. Yeah, it's probably your struts. A lot of times when struts start to go bad and bushings start to wear out, you'll get a popping noise coming from the suspension system. So I would, if depending on the miles, if you got over 100,000 miles on there, I'd look into replacing some front struts. It's not that bad. You can buy them online at Rock Auto for a really good price. That's what I would do. I have a small EVAP leak on my Trailblazer. I replaced the fuel pump since it was rusty. EVAP canister, purge valve, EVAP solenoid, and I'm having an issue filling up the tank. Okay, seeing as you have an EVAP leak and you're having problems filling it up, but you already replaced the solenoid. I'm guessing the vent solenoid on that vehicle. This sounds crazy, but I've seen it personally. You want to check the EVAP lines for spider webs. I'll never forget this. I had a 2009 HHR when I worked at the dealership that the customer had the exact same complaint. Check engine light, hard to fill up with fuel. I remember pulling the lines out and thinking, well, there's got to be a restriction somewhere. Something's going on. And to this day, it creeps me out. So if you've got a fear of spiders, brace yourselves. So I took the line out of the vehicle and I held one end of it and then took my air gun here and blasted some high pressure air through there, and a spider web came out. And I thought, well, that's weird. So I kind of looked down the pipe and then this giant spider crawled out. So yeah, look for spider webs in your EVAP lines. That could definitely be the problem. Okay, here we go. Another classic question. Is a 5-liter V8 more reliable than a turbocharged engine? Yeah, it's more reliable because you have fewer moving parts. You have less components that require lubrication to stay in a healthy mechanical condition. So yeah, the 5-liter is definitely more reliable than, I'm guessing what you're referring to is the turbocharged EcoBoost engines. They are more reliable. However, if you take care of those EcoBoost engines, they can last a long, long time. Go watch my video called 200,000 Mile F-150 EcoBoost Review, and you'll see that this guy has had very few problems with this truck. Most of them were ignition related, and we solved them with spark plugs and ignition coils. So kind of a maintenance item if you think about it. But overall, you've got fewer moving parts and you've got fewer lubricated components. Yeah, it's going to be more reliable. Daniel, what do you think about Teslas and electric cars in general? Have you ever serviced one, sorry. I've never serviced a Tesla, but to be honest with you, I would like to buy a Tesla. I really want a Tesla as my next car. That would be exciting for me. One of the reasons being is because it's an all-electric car that is really taking off in popularity. I'd like to get familiar with it and see how they do. I love Teslas, and their owners love them too. If you look in Consumer Reports, they are by a long shot the best rated vehicle customer satisfaction wise. Extremely reliable, no internal combustion engine, so there's really nothing to go wrong with them. All you got to do is charge it, maybe once in a lifetime put brake pads on it, and tires. I mean, they're wiper blades, maybe some bulbs here and there. There's just nothing to go wrong with those cars. People love them. I like the idea of them, and honestly, I'd really love to get one myself. Okay, let's see here. We've got some emails to go through. This one is from Cole regarding his 5.3-liter Chevy Avalanche 2007 to 2013. Or not his in particular, rather just asking general questions about them. Clarify that. Hi, I've been a subscriber for years. You're awesome. Well, thank you very much. I try to be the best that I can be. How are the second-gen Chevy Avalanches from 2007 to the end of production in 2013, and what is the best year? I've heard the 5.3 engines have oil consumption, but how bad is the consumption? And is there really a fix for it? I've seen a technical service bulletin for different valve covers and PCV valve relocation, but I've also heard of piston rings being the cause. I'm looking to possibly buy a used Avalanche in the 100,000 to 160,000 mile range. Any input would be great before I lay down all my dollar signs. Yeah. So good choice. As always, you want to fill yourself in and learn about something before you go spending, 5-figure dollars on a vehicle. So yeah, I'd be happy to help you out here. Look around on the Chevy Avalanche forums and you'll basically see what I'm going to answer here from a bunch of other people. The 2007 to 2010 5.3-liter engines from General Motors had the cylinder deactivation, and they had problems with oil consumption big time. And believe me, we've tried the different valve covers, the PCV valve relocation. Every single one of them came down to piston rings being the cause of the oil consumption. So if you buy a 2007 to 2010, one of the things I would want to know is if that engine has had pistons put in it. If the engine has had pistons installed, then you're good. You shouldn't have any problems with the engine. I would be curious to know who did it. Was it a dealer that did it under warranty? Was it the owner himself? How good of a job did he do, etc.? So if you want to avoid all those problems, though, I would look for a 2011 to 2013. They fixed the oil consumption issues on those, and you're more than likely to get a better, you're getting a newer vehicle anyway, so it might cost you a little bit more, but your likelihood of having problems with oil consumptions are going to be much, much less. Okay. Got another question here via Gmail. My aunt has a 2005 Durango. She bought it new, but it has weird engine trouble. When it started, it runs fine, but after it warms up, it starts to run bad, and then it starts to shudder and cut out, and then just dies and won't start. She told me the engine, or she was told the engine needed to be replaced, and so she went and bought a 2015 Tahoe and stopped driving the Durango. Is there any hope for the original engine? Well, first off, she made a good choice going with the 2015 Tahoe, because those are good SUVs. I would take a Tahoe before a Durango. That's my personal preference. That being said, some of the new Durangos are pretty cool, especially the SRT Durangos. Are extremely fast and fun to drive. Is there any hope for the original engine? Yeah, I would say there's hope. Seeing as it ran fine before it warmed up tells me that the engine was in okay shape mechanically. I'm not sure who told her that the engine needed to be replaced, but I would say that is probably not the case. I would look into, it's kind of hard to say now what to do, but you want to check and see if there are any trouble codes stored in the engine control module. That's going to point you in the right direction. As far as once it warms up and then dies once it warms up, you want to check mass airflow sensors, manifold absolute pressure sensors, whichever ones those had. That could be the problem. The other thing that could be the case is you may have a clogged catalytic converter. I've seen that in very rare instances cause problems with engines stalling out. So, but first things first, I would check your mass airflow sensor and your a manifold absolute pressure sensor, depending on which one it has. That could be the case. You may also want to try cleaning out the throttle body and the idle air control valve if it has one. Here's another question. Hi Dan, I have a question about my 98 Ram 1500 that only has 119,000 miles. Wow, that's pretty low. I recently had the intake gaskets and plenum replaced, as well as the plenum plate changed to aluminum. Since then, it has sucked about half a quart of oil every 300 miles or so. It also misfires randomly at around 2,000 RPM. Do you have any ideas on why it would suck oil and misfire randomly? Well, seeing as the problem started right after you had the intake gaskets and the plenum replaced, that is where I would go first to look for a possible problem. It's hard to say why, but I can tell you that as far as the engine using a half a quart of oil every 300 miles, that's a lot of oil to be burning. And misfiring randomly, what that tells me is that oil that you're losing is probably making its way into the cylinders somehow and causing the engine to misfire. That would be my guess. I would take it back to the shop who replaced those and have them look at it. And if you did it yourself, sometimes you have to pull things back apart and take a look again. I'll tell you guys a story here about something I had to take back apart again as well to figure out what happened. I had a 2001 Ford Explorer with a 4-liter single overhead cam V6 engine. I replaced the thermostat on it. I did it outside in the afternoon. The job went a little longer than I expected. And to be on the safe side, I took a paper towel and stuffed it in the intake to keep dirt and debris and whatnot from getting in there. Unfortunately, it got dark, and when I put everything back together, I did not see the paper towel in the intake manifold. So you can guess where this is going. I started up, it ran great, gave it a little throttle, and then it started misfiring like crazy. So I had to take everything back apart again, found out there's a paper towel in the intake. So fortunately, being a paper towel, the engine was able to chew up the pieces of it that actually got down into the valves. And it ended up working its way through what paper towel material did get into the engine, and it ran fine. So I got lucky there. Had that been a shop rag, that would have been a much worse problem. Okay, now that it's winter, the debate about running AC comes up. Yes, it does. What's your opinion about running the compressor in the winter? Should you leave the AC on all year or turn it off? A lot of new cars have fully automatic climate controls in them, and they're going to turn the AC compressor on and off based on what the vehicle needs. If you're just running the heater in your car, there's no need to run the AC compressor, because in colder climates, the air is generally drier. Usually the colder the temperature gets, the drier the air is. What having the air conditioning compressor running does is it dries the air out. That's why you have it on in the summertime, because you want to lower the humidity, because, you know, if you're down in Florida, you know all about that humidity though. And it's going to help you dry out the air, which is really going to help the air feel cooler. However, in winter, the air is already dry. That being said, if you run the defrost or the defrost and floor mix like they have on a lot of cars, the AC compressor is going to run regardless of whether you want to turn it on and off with the button. For this reason, when you're running the defrost, you want dry air blowing on your windshield so that it causes all that condensation, that moisture that builds up on your windshield to evaporate. So when you run the defroster in the wintertime, the AC compressor is going to run regardless. If you're just running heat for the floor or the panel vents, there's no need to run the AC compressor because the air is already dry. It's really not going to make any difference. It's up to you whether you want to run it or not, except for defrost. It's going to run when you turn defrost on. All right, let's go back to some more comments here. Okay. Have seen many posts about the Ford F-150 rear defroster shattering windows. Do you have any thoughts on this? Not going to use mine for fear of this. Okay, you know, you're not the first person to bring that up. I personally haven't seen any, but I've heard about it. I've also heard about these panoramic sunroofs shattering as well. It's hard to say whether it's going to happen or not. Yeah, I don't know on that one. That's a good question. I haven't witnessed it personally, so it's kind of hard for me to say. Okay, here's kind of a funny question. A Dodge 250, it's got a parking issue where if you put it directly into a park after a long drive, it won't show it's in park. But if you drive from park, it'll go into park. What are some possibilities? Okay, after a long drive, it won't show it's in park. Okay, my question then to you would be, does the transmission actually go into park? Can you take your foot off the brake and the vehicle will stop? If not, you've got a shift cable that needs to be adjusted. If it does, then there's probably a problem with your, what they call a Prindle sensor. Park reverse neutral drive is what that stands for. Sometimes those sensors can get out of adjustment and not read properly. So I would start with that. Where's the old Kubota tractor? Do you still have it? Oh, we still got it. I'm not sure how much longer it's going to be around though. So might want to make some videos of that before it's gone. Okay. My brother just bought a 2001 Dodge Ram 2500 5.9 Cummins last night. He said there is a severe knocking, rattling noise when in park or neutral, but when in gear, the noise is gone. Any common issues? Okay, you say park or neutral, so I'm assuming that it's an automatic transmission. If that's the case, there could be an issue with the automatic transmission bearings inside the transmission. Those trucks were known to have very weak transmissions. If it's a manual transmission and he's just putting it in neutral and letting the clutch out, it's probably a bad throwout bearing, which is much easier to replace. Okay, let's see if we've got any more messages here. Okay, Chris Gibson has a question here he sent me via Messenger. Says, hope you're doing well. I wanted to ask your opinion on a vehicle that I may possibly be buying. A friend of mine has a 2004 Jeep Grand Cherokee Overland with a 4.7 V8 in it. Only 100,000 miles, runs great and drives great from what I can see. Are those good, reliable vehicles without too many issues? I'm replacing the blend doors in it this coming week for my friend, but so far I like the vehicle and may consider buying it. I just wanted your opinion, that's all. Thanks so much for taking time to read my question. Okay, the inline 4-liter or the inline 4-liter 6-cylinder engine was definitely more reliable, but that being said, I've seen the 4.7 V8s run a long time with no major issues. Seeing as it has 100,000 miles on it and it's a 2004, it wasn't really driven that much. So I would look for possible coolant leaks from the water pump. Just like anything else, it depends on how well it was maintained. Get to know the owner of the vehicle before you buy the vehicle. Ask him for service records. How well was the vehicle maintained? They can be a good engine that lasts a long time, but just like anything else, it all depends on how well the vehicle was maintained. Another Avalanche question here. I got another question. What about the 6-liter in the Avalanche from 2007 to 2009? Do they have any oil burning issues? They're going to use a little bit of oil, but nowhere near as much as the 5.3 liters that had the cylinder deactivation feature on them. They're not going to burn near as much oil. That being said, you're going to go through a lot more fuel in that 6-liter. Those were really built for towing. They're geared for towing. You're going to go through more fuel, but you're going to have a lot more power. So take your pick. All right, let's see if we've got any more questions here. Getting close to an hour, so I'm probably going to start wrapping it up. If anybody else has any more questions, again, email me at dieseldude92@gmail.com. You can also send me a message on my Facebook page or here on YouTube, whichever one you prefer. We'll take a few more questions before we wrap it up for today. All right, let's see here. Do you know why the 6-liter Power Stroke had head gasket problems? Well, the biggest reason I think, and I learned this by watching Power Stroke help, is because if you take the cylinder heads off of those engines, you'll notice that they've only got 4 head bolts per cylinder. The 7.3s had 6. So that's already kind of an indication that, wow, this engine, you know, it was built slightly weaker than the 7.3. I think that's probably why they had, one of the main reasons why they had problems with that. There were other reasons involved, just weaker gasket material. People would put tuners on them and run lots of boost into the engines, and that would cause problems, especially only having 4 head bolts per cylinder. But if you want to learn more about that, you can go watch Power Stroke Help on YouTube here. Again, he's the expert on this type of stuff. Okay, let's see here. We got one more message here on Gmail. Okay, oh, this is a continuation of the issue with the Ram 1500 that's using oil. About 5 years ago, I started smoking really bad and was sucking oil much worse than now. When I would start from a stop, it would bog down, lose considerable amounts of power when accelerating. After the gaskets were replaced, it has diminished a lot, but still sucks oil. Could it possibly be rings? Okay, so yeah, it could be rings. The other thing I would look into is your valve guide seals. If a valve guide seal goes bad, that can cause a lot of smoke after startup when the vehicle's been sitting for a long time. So check your valve stem seals. That could definitely have an effect on it as well. All right, let's see if we've got any more Facebook messages here before we wrap things up. I really appreciate all your guys' questions and the conversations here. This is a lot of fun. So thank you guys. Okay, we've got one more message here. This is from Gmail. What's the worst thing that's happened to the Excursion? Okay. As far as body damage goes, the worst thing that happened was when I hit a deer. We had to basically replace the front bumper. We put that upgraded 05 to 07 style grill on it. But that's really the worst body damage issue we've ever had with that truck. It just hasn't really been involved in any accidents, unless you saw my April Fool's joke where I posted a photo of a totaled out white limited Ford Excursion. The front end was just completely wiped out of it, and a lot of people fell for it. I had some fun with that one. Powertrain wise, the transmission going out was the worst and most expensive fix we've had to do to that thing. That transmission went out at about 104,000 miles. It was a really common issue with the transmissions overheating on those because they had insufficient cooling. So once the transmission was replaced, they put the auxiliary cooler in there, and we haven't had any problems with it since. We're coming up on 250,000 miles on the replacement transmission with no problems. I really can't think of anything else worse than that has happened to that truck. It's been through a lot. It's done a lot. It's a real workhorse, and it's proven to be a really good vehicle. So, all right, I think that's going to wrap it up for today, guys. Thank you again for tuning in. This has been another great question and answer show. Thanks for your participation, and as always, here's the way to ask me a question. If you want to ask a question for the next live stream, you can email me at the email address down there in the description of this video. You can find my Facebook fan page on YouTube and send me a message there, and you can also send me a message on YouTube. Either one of those will work just fine, and we'll compile those questions up into the next live stream, and I'll see you guys then. Until then, have a great weekend. I'm not exactly sure when the next live stream is going to be because I'm going to be pretty busy here over the next few weekends with Christmas coming up and stuff like that. So if I don't see you guys via live stream here this month, I wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Have fun, enjoy, see your friends and family, and have a great time. Talk to you all soon. Take care.